a journey. Thank you. Now that I'm unmuted, welcome to People Purpose Place. And tonight is an introduction to the idea behind People Purpose Place and introducing our hosts. The intention is we'll do a series of podcasts where you can ask questions and have some feedback. Tonight is perhaps a bit more of an introduction. So we've got Darren Finlay. Welcome, Darren.
Thanks, Ro.
We've got Christine Doan as well. G'day, Christine.
G'day, Ron. G'day, Darren. G'day, everybody.
We would put ourselves forward as people passionate about housing and keen to see better housing outcomes. So that's the reason that we've combined our forces. And what we might cover today is no light or simple topic. The problem we're addressing is perhaps termed as the housing crisis, but for each of us, that headline will actually manifest in different ways. Might be accessibility or suitability for our needs, durability for the environment that we live in. So People Purpose Place are a non-for-profit with a specific goal to enable stable, secure, purposeful housing that is not currently available. We won't leave anyone on their own to do this in isolation. If you're willing to work with us, we'll deliver this as an intentional group solution. So that's our reason to be. People Purpose Place, we will also invite, because we're a collaborative process, we'll invite in experts to talk to you from time to time. And the idea is hopefully you'll get to know us and feel comfortable with what the ideas we're talking to, what are some of our values, and what you should expect from us are probably some of the topics to cover off. So the problem we're trying to solve are large challenges and questions, not for the faint-hearted, and we're not trying to replicate or replace business as usual. So if you're in the mainstream of housing in the usual process and going to a bank and buying from a developer and the existing process that works, that's fantastic. But what we're trying to do is to answer questions for the increasing number of our population who are frozen out of, excluded, or unable to find suitable housing for their needs in the market. So maybe we could talk to the People Purpose Place introduction today, and come along on the journey, see if you if this resonates for you. One of the questions that is unique about People Purpose Place is trying to explain what it is that we're here to do. And I'll give maybe Darren the opportunity to talk with a bit of an introduction about how he ended up here. I know Darren as a second generation builder, a profession for more than 25 years that in construction space. But Darren, if I could start with maybe your background to how you ended up in this point, that might help people with a bit of context about what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and I can probably also maybe model this as part of our check-in question process, which is a part of our normal meeting process that we like to have, is as an opportunity for all of us to, I suppose, be present in our meetings. One of the things that we do a lot of is making sure we check in, and I'm happy to model that today by having a little bit of my background. I know last week you gave us some great insight to your both personal history as well as your history from a career point of view. And I know probably over the next week, Christine might do the same as part of her check-in. So, I mean, obviously, as you mentioned, my journey is probably tied strongly to the building industry side of things. But I think I've probably gone on two different paths. So one of them is my career path and, this idea of the building industry and what it is. And the other is my own personal journey, which, both of you have enormously helped me through that journey as well. But, I originally, my dad is a builder, so I get to be a son of a builder, if that's not a swear word. And I finished school in the in the early 90s. And my dad is actually a little bit of an outlier in some ways, in the fact that I can always remember him trying to take on stuff that was fairly cutting edge. We had the, polybaric hot water system when no one else did, and we tried things that were different. Dad had built octagonal homes and those sorts of things. So I think innovation has always been a little bit in my blood from that point of view. So I started after doing some work with Dad, and obviously the normal father-son thing. It's probably unlikely you're going to work for your father for your whole life. But I still had a passion for the industry, so I stayed in that space, more focusing on the business side of what it was to be a builder. So worked in trusses and wall frames and those sorts of areas. And my personal journey at that stage was really about trying to grow up and be a normal person, or whatever a normal person actually is. But, and some of that was enjoying the tropical environment that we live in here in Northern Australia, and being able to get out in the environment and see what that actually looked like, and what nature, how it shaped you as a person when you didn't have a building around you to protect you. And in the late or early 2000s, I worked for large construction companies doing the bigger is better, all the stuff we've all done. We just talked about, business as usual. If you can't do some of it, do lots of it, which was the part that I was involved in, just trying to throw up more of these things. But I did start to realize there was a little bit of a nagging stuff to do there with, is this really the right thing to be doing? Just because we can do lots of it and potentially make lots of money, is this really the right thing to be doing? So in 2003, 2004, I thought, I can probably do this better. I can become a builder myself. And if I could fly back to that person, I'd probably give him a slap around the chops and say, "You idiot." But it's good experience. You need to do these things, hence this grey beard when I'm 26 now. So that can only come through experience. So I started that journey, and while I was doing that, my personal journey had gone from enjoying the environment to thinking about how do I make goals and how do I be successful and how do I do more of those things. But soon I started to realize, after having my own construction business, that I didn't want to perpetuate what I'd done before, which is the more is more and bigger is better and all of those things. So I thought it would be important to start to build housing that I could be proud of, and potentially my children could be proud of, and that was making a difference. And we started to play around with this idea that we wanted to do houses that was improving people's lives. And that's where we started playing around with sustainability and looking at, can we do things better? And some of those experiences were from me being in the environment, growing up and out camping and those sorts of things. You realized, you don't really need a lot to feel quite comfortable. You got water, you got a shade tree to be under, you can go for a swim, you can get cool, all of those things, find a place to have something to eat, sit around a fire, and that can be as fulfilling as any life you've had. So along those lines, we started to build those pilot versions. So, what could an affordable 10-star home look like? What does building a tiny house look like? And can it be healthy for you and for the environment? And through that journey is probably the last part of my personal journey, which is I realized that change for ourselves as well as for a whole industry is incredibly challenging. And I think maybe one thing that might be a magnet for us three is the fact that we've been drawn to this idea that we can't keep doing what we've always done. There's got to be a better approach there. We don't know what that better approach is, but between us, maybe we can think about something that might be a better alternative. Because I had realized that waiting for the building industry to change was going to be a sorry old time waiting for that to happen. And the two other ways for change to occur that I could see was a big enough problem. So that situation maybe that, if you're in Johannesburg and you got 50 litres of water a day, you suddenly become really water efficient. And the last one was if you let the government intervene. And we've seen historically how that's rolled over the years. And so with that, it sort of almost comes back to this starting point of saying that we realized there was a massive problem in the housing industry, and that we felt like there was a better way to look at it. And surprisingly enough, that personal journey come back to looking at self rather than looking for more. And once I look at myself, I realized we are part of the solution. We're also part of the problem. And maybe as groups, we can work to find some way that can hopefully be a bit of a solution. So I hope that gives a little bit of a background to myself, and I'm keen and excited to hear next time we catch up to get Christine to fill in her part of the story.
Thank you, Darren. That's a great backstory and does help fill in a few of the dots. Dot. How did we get here?
Yes.
Thank you as modelling a check-in as well. Christine, we might get you to do something through the week so that we've all got our own backstory. For those of us who have a keen ear, we'll soon pick up that Christine's got a different background to us. So the check-in question is something that we use to reflect back on that. Typically, we wouldn't say 10 minutes for everybody in the meeting, but it's a great way for all of us to get on the same page and put aside our baggage and the other influences that somewhat distract us from being here in the moment. So thank you, Darren, for leaning into that and doing a check-in with your introduction. And how did we get to this point? Each of us are on our own journey. We've got our own unique view of the world and history. But it is interesting and fantastic. I appreciate the support of both of you for my journey today, as Darren pointed out as well. Christine, if I could ask you perhaps to speak to the check-in question. You seem to be the guiding influence in so many ways that does pull us up or just get us to recheck at this process that we use. We're getting very consistent with it for a good reason. Do you want to speak to that perhaps?
Certainly. It is interesting that we have a favorite. I have certainly a favorite check-in question, and we usually restrict the check-in time to 30 seconds or a minute, depending on how many people are in the meeting and how deep we want to go. But my favorite check-in question is, what do you need to put on the table now that will allow you to be fully present during the meeting? In other words, if your cat just got run over by a car, that's something that will be weighing on your heart. If something worse happened to you, or if you stubbed your toe, you might just be a little bit, and sometimes just saying, I'm a little bit, is enough to let you let go of the, or whatever it is, the heartache, what you're hanging on to. And so I'll just model that. My check-in is the following. I felt a little rushed coming into the meeting today, and I always get my perfectionist jumps up and says, I'm going to strangle you if when I get feeling like, oh, I don't have time. So I just like to put that on the table, that I've pretty much got over it, but I just want to say that to everyone so that you're aware that I'm not in a perfect space. I'm in a good space, but I'm not in a perfect space. And now I'm in a better space because I've said that little bit about how having a little bit of a rush makes me a little anxious. My perfectionist gets crazy. So thank you.
Yeah. And I think those are some of the tools that we're hoping that as groups start to form, that maybe we can give them a little bit of a toolkit that they can use themselves to help them form better groups and have better tools. And probably at that point, one of the things we're conscious of, because we live inside of it, is that we're always a little bit conscious of the fact that we're looking at a housing solution and it's something that's a bit unique. But if I was to ask both of you, what do you think is unique about People Purpose Place as a solution, just so that if viewers are just picking up on us now, what is it exactly that we're trying to do, and how is this different from business as usual? So, Rowan, do you have a sort of thought that might succinctly, for others, help them articulate what People Purpose Place is trying to do?
As a check-in.
No. Succinctly is always my challenge. Certainly I don't do. You should know this.
The challenge is all three of us. Maybe we'll get, if we gather an audience, we might be able to get some people who want to talk over the top of us and say, shut up for a minute, I got a question.
Absolutely.
And I think my experience, or this framework that we've got together, often we jump to the things. So what kind of house, what should the structure look like, what kind of materials, where would we locate it, kind of questions, rather than the people. And for me, the people is scary because humans are so weird, but also the biggest possible gain. If we can get the people to work together, to collaborate at any level, I'm a father of 3 kids. I've seen dysfunction, right? And I've been in multinational companies that have done, the management check of their people to see how engaged they are, and they were impressed with better than 50% engagement of their employees. So we see dysfunction, we see poor human operation, and we can look at any sort of system or process around us and see really underperforming outcomes that are not, the bigger budget or the quicker delivery or the whatever. It's actually the people outcome that are consistently messed up.
Yep.
So for me, the people, purpose, place, people are listed first in the name, because outcomes
for a reason
are actually much better. We can have much better outcomes for people if we keep our focus at the people level. The purpose.
Christine, do you have anything else? Do you have anything else, do you think, that makes the people, purpose, place concept unique?
I think Rowan's done a beautiful job of it, but yes, I feel very strongly that although I've done personal development work since I was actually quite young, and I'm pretty old now, and I'm still wondering who I am. But well, 73 is not too young to ask yourself, what does the rest of my life look like? So the people, if I'm scared shitless about launching into a project like this, and I believe that all of us should be scared if we're going to have proper respect for something different that requires our engagement on a really authentic level. And boy, oh boy, am I good at that? No. No, absolutely not. Am I learning? Yes. And that's what we want this to be, a learning obstacle course where we all come up with better people with better housing. But it's the better people that are the most important. We could all live in a shed. We could live happily with other people.
Even allowing your best self to come forward. How many compromises are we accepting on a daily basis?
Yeah. And we begin to ask ourselves, do I even have a best self? What is my better self? That's
do we tolerate poorly maintained property because I don't want to make a noise, and but it's a safety issue or a health issue, and it should be rectified. But we accept. Maybe that's as simple as starting there, and of course,
I think
change is difficult.
Just adding in the last little bit.
Sorry, Darren. Have you swallowed some feeling about somebody else that you could have said right then? Oh, I'd love it if you didn't do that, or it would make me feel better if you could, whatever it is.
Yeah.
If we could learn to do that, just to say to each other, I want this. And if possible, could I have it? It's such a question. And yet we all struggle so much with just saying, I'd like it to be like this, without any animosity, without any prerogative, without any demand, just this is the way I'd like it. And find that really hard. It's hard. Sorry, Darren, you were going to say something.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, and we've been deep in this space so much that it's sometimes hard to articulate when people ask us, what exactly are you guys doing? We're talking a lot and we're giving you lots of good ideas, but primarily I think to explain to people that we are looking to say, if you were to say that we think that we might need some level of collaboration or some level of sharing to solve our housing issues, whatever they look like, whether they're aging in place or whether they're affordability or whether there's connection of humans, that housing solutions potentially we could have a lot better cut through in the market if we looked at options that it meant that people could share. So we're using terms like, collaborative households as a housing solution. And I think you guys best articulate that once you make a decision that your housing solution might require a group of people to work together to do that, how do you get the people bits? How do you get the tools? Maybe even how do you get the forgotten skills that in today's world we don't have available to us? So hopefully we can help you have those tools. So if you make a decision to say, hey, look, I think a housing solution that involves sharing might be an option for me, then we're hoping to give you the ability to actually make that thing happen, because we do want to see, after being in conceptual world for so long, I think we all are very much in there. We actually want to see action. We actually want to see people make a change to housing, and hopefully we can be part of that change.
And make a change to community in order to, at least on a small basis, in order to make a change in housing that represents what our real needs are.
Absolutely. And that's a very important
some projects to deliver, so we can talk to those specific examples. In some ways, I'm excited and reluctant, because I don't also want that example to be seen as everybody's solution. Because I think the idea is that we present ideas and talk about delivery, but for every group and individual and circumstance, that should hopefully look and feel different and better matched to those individual circumstances.
Absolutely.
One of the key topics that I wanted to cover off maybe as an introduction as well is to think about the values from us as a group, as People Purpose Place, this non-for-profit entity. How do you feel about values and truth telling? Darren, did you want to speak to that as a start?
Absolutely. And I think we discussed this a little bit, and I'm glad you asked the question, to say that, there's lots of podcasts out there that are, and are silly and funny, and that's excellent. And I like watching some of those as well. But I think one of the things that we've acknowledged that is that if we're going to talk in topics that are going to be a little bit involved, that we want also people feel confident that we hold truth as being a very important value. And that if we do get it wrong, that we're happy to go back and correct each other. And we also use some of this terminology, which we've learned, and thanks to Christine for putting us on the journey of going towards the collaborative operating system. But there will be times when we will look at increasing our explicitness, being very, very thorough about what we're saying for the sake of not implying stuff, so not being implicit about these things. So I think for me, it's an important value that we hold each other accountable to our honesty, because in today's world, there's a lot of stuff out there that maybe isn't necessarily as honest as it needs to be, and that we're also happy to play with the idea, and we do it a lot. And sometimes it gets uncomfortable for us, but holding all of us to be explicit and make sure that we're very clear about what we're saying is also an important team building skill, because I think that little bit of being tested in the gauntlet has certainly made us better as a team, because we're willing to take that journey towards explicitness. So that's, the values that I think are important.
Definitely. I'm glad you've touched on the implicit and explicit as well. We have, this is a live podcast, so we have the ability for people to jump in and offer feedback and raise questions and challenges, any statement that we say. I suspect that at some level, the media and headline chasing world that is, very, very short snippets of information, you can't possibly paint the Mona Lisa in this much data. You're only getting a headline, and the story is so much broader and more complex than that. You can't possibly give the whole message. You can paint, girl with funny smile. It's not quite the same thing.
Not quite the same.
Doesn't quite have the same impact.
Smile. Oh, well, maybe not. So yeah, values, and over time, I guess that also leads to some of these answers. What's true for today and what's true for this person or this circumstance is not true for everybody in every circumstance, and in time that changes as well. One of our earlier conversations around housing solutions was thinking about the concept of housing suitable for our whole of life and all the chapters that our life has. Now that is just not as crazy as it might seem, but it's certainly foreign to our current thinking conversation. So there's definitely some ideas that will be open to challenge. We welcome feedback and input, because I'm certain that I don't have many answers or all of the answers, and we would welcome others to jump in and say their bit.
And I think something else you mentioned too is the reason we have gone to a podcast is also that the long format is not open to short answers, and people will have to bear with us a little bit, because obviously as we continue to dive down rabbit holes over the next weeks and months, I'm sure there's going to be times when, the short answer would be a hell of a lot easier because you get some clickbait out of it. But that's not how, if we've got ourselves into some really big challenges, they can't be answered in a 2-second answer. So I think your point about the Mona Lisa, as I understood it, is very, very valid in the fact that it's not, you can't be done in a snap. You need to understand the total situation before you can move forward into whatever a solution might look like for you.
And I think that I hadn't heard you use that particular metaphor before, Rowan, but I like the Mona Lisa because what do they usually say? Not a funny smile, but a mysterious smile. And of course, the whole process of bringing people together or learning who you are or going on the journey of personal development or health or whatever it is, healthy housing, there's an element of mystery and an element of, I suppose, even humility that we have to adopt in order to be authentic enough to keep exploring and to keep deepening where we're going with all this. And boy, that you can't fit into a GIF. You just can't fit it into a GIF. You have to have time. And we all need time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've even experienced this ourselves, isn't it? Like, I like your explanation before there, Christine, that, once you get into a discussion around what could, if you were going to share in a house, what could that look like? Our internal biases have jumped straight off the page, and we were like, sounds like this, this sounds like a really good solution. And I get, on some level, it feels really right. And we know that our housing now feels really wrong. And I know we're walking to this spot, but my internal bias is telling me, I'm going to be going into uncomfortable spots here. And I think that idea of what you just mentioned there, really, pulling back the layers and, being intrigued by the mystery of that, why do we feel like that? And what is behind that? Because behind that, we've found some really powerful revelations, which is, we're all a lot more close as humans than we originally thought, we originally perceive. But we also need to, be happy to lean into that and go to that space where we can be honest with each other, that we can see that. So I think that's a very good point.
Or even to be honest with ourselves. Hard work.
Exactly.
Totally.
Worth doing. Yeah.
So maybe also clarifying for people, Christine, you might speak to this a bit. Some of the function that people purpose place is not. So that sometimes offers clarity about, you know, what space we are playing in. Because we've talked and we've sort of settled on a group of people. This is not 100 people buying a farming property, for example, as a solution for their needs, is it?
No, and I think that there are people who will want some kind of farming adventure.
Yep.
That's not what we're talking about. And there are people who will want to have lots of families together and a big spread out area or whatever. That's probably not where we can start, but we're looking at, and we're not looking at solving the housing crisis. We are not the government.
No.
We can't fix housing in Australia. But the question is, can we do something better for a group of 5 people? Can we do something better? And can we find a way to finance this such that we're not dependent on the government? We're not dependent on grants. We're not dependent on donations. We're not treating each other as cases, so that we're treating each other as humans, and we all are bringing something to the table such that the finances can work and the humanity can work and society and sharing, and that we create a little better functional unit than most of the units we've lived in. And that you people meaning. And that's hard to combine the people, the finances, and the building design and the actual structure. That's a lot to put into one package. And I think you two have conceptualized this really beautifully, and you've worked through it in terms of how compliance with council is going to work, how the finances are going to work, and how the hell are we going to be able to get along together. So not everybody's going to want to do this. We're not looking for everybody. We're not saving the world. We're just looking for a few of you who are really inspired.
It's quite likely, though, that we have clusters, groups, associations in our life already that we go, hey, when I go camping, I always ring these 4 lunatics because they've got common values to me and they like the same sort of camp spots, and we all do fishing. So, now that may not be your permanent home residence group, but you go, yes, there are plenty of groups that I have. I do a regular Friday night grumpy old men's meeting, and they're the grumpiest, oldest blokes that you can ever find. And I fit right in. So we all have our peeps.
We have our peeps.
And I think the bit that I pulled from that as well, or stuff that I found important about what we're trying to do is, and you mentioned it there, is we're not trying to provide guerrilla warfare to housing either. We want this thing to be compliant. We want it to be able to fit anywhere in Australia. We want to fit in with town plans. We want to work with the existing systems. And although we're trying to work outside the system, by not starting an argument with the existing structural mechanisms would seem like a sensible way to do it. So, literally we think we can change one household at a time. And as you said, if you're already drawn together for a particular reason, why not start there? And I'm constantly surprised that we still have this innate ability that we do start to talk about. We're in cities but never been so lonely. So I think there's sort of almost a feeling at the moment in today's society that we are urging towards this idea of increased connection. But it's still intrinsically important that we be our individuals. And I think this is the bit maybe that you and I, Christine, are working through personally, is how do we increase our connectivity, but deal with the fact that we have individual needs. Rowan's already an enlightened person and can get on with people readily, and it's just us that are going to fight our way through this. But ultimately, that comes back to once we figured the mechanisms to find a compliant small group household that can work, then how do we layer the people bits over the top of that? But I think we're all drawn to it on some level, but we just got to work through, follow those mysteries. And I think that's why we've actually said, this isn't for everyone. If you don't want to do the hard work, but please don't ring us up and ask for a housing solution, because it ain't here. What it is a journey for you to find a way to something that might be even larger than your house. It might be something that's really important to your being, which is why we know the work is challenging, but I think we're also excited by it, by the fact that it could be not only game changing for your accommodation, but and I think you might have said it even better than anyone in the last week. Christine, you mentioned this. Everyone's talking about homelessness, when the discussion should be about, they're talking about houselessness, not actually homelessness. A home is something different. They're just talking about they haven't got a house to live in. We're talking about solving your home problem. Like, what does a home look like? And I think you put that so well that, that stuck with me for sure.
Certainly, we're not going to solve the houselessness crisis or problem, and we're not going to solve the homelessness, but we certainly want a solution that creates a home, not just a house.
Yes.
And that's a little harder work than, if Australia decided, so if San Francisco decided, I don't want any homeless people, houseless people living on the streets, we could solve the problem like that. It's just a question of money.
Correct.
It isn't our priority, but that's not what we're doing. That's up to the government. That's not what we're doing. What we're doing is looking to create a house that becomes a home for a whole number of unrelated people. Quite a different project.
And quite a bit hard. And I think you're
rewarding and exciting at the same time.
Yeah, 100%. That whole discussion around integral housing and, the fact that it's not just one component. It's not just about the house. It's multiple layers. And that's sort of the most terrifying and exciting part of what we're doing, is the fact that it's in that space, which can be massively game-changing, but also comes with its own certain amount of pineapples inherently.
Yep. Yeah. That probably leads well into the rabbit hole of looking down at housing, which, the more we look at it, the more nuance and detail we find. This new paradigm of looking at housing, Christine and Darren, it says, as in the paradigm of sharing, it might be a solution for some people willing to do that work. What's been the thing that surprised you most in these conversations and developing this process?
I can probably jump in there in the first instance. I'd be most surprised. When we first we started looking at all the mechanical bits, how do we get a house? How do we sit these people in? And the best way to do it is we're past a point where generally as individuals, we're going to have enough wealth and free for all to be able to find the solution ourselves. So we need to pull it together, and we need to look at, maybe sharing, so that those things just sort of form themselves by themselves. Then after that point, when you get to that realization that sharing might be a component, our own internal reservations come up. But the thing that surprised me most is that as we've continued to run workshops, I've been constantly surprised that once people do a little bit of work, that the natural draw to be a part of a group is actually stronger than I ever thought possible. Our drive to be connected is actually incredibly deep. And that when we start to pull off the layers of what make us different, there's so many things at the core of our evolution over life that make us so similar and so drawn together. This idea of sitting around a fire and talking about our day's events or our week's events or whatever. No matter what workshop we've talked to, everyone's come back and made that statement. The idea of connecting back with our environment and maybe even, having some fruit and vegetables in our own yard, no matter what walks of life, what demographics, what age, whatever we talk to, these are inherently human things. And people go, so I'm just constantly surprised that I'm writing down these things, no matter where we are, from, down south to up north or wherever we are. And I'm writing down these things that are exactly the same.
These are the same people.
That's the thing that's
workshop.
And so that really has actually been almost like a pleasant surprise, that where as humans we desire, we know that our vagal nerve tells us that we were built to be a tribal animal, but I think I might have forgotten that in today's crazy world. But when you strip back all of the crap we got going on around, the core human part of us actually desires to be in that environment. And we've had some massively robust conversations just in our meetings, which are the highlight of my week, potentially. And those things for me tell me that there's a lot more humanness in all of us once we get past all of the other bits. But it has been surprising. I didn't expect that to be there, but I certainly have been intrigued that it's there. What about yourself, Ron? What's some stuff that you've picked up?
Well, I guess starting from a products and things point of view. So I started that as a supplier to industry, and here's the perfect thing. So I would run around and tell every builder, here's the ideal thing for your building or for every set of circumstances. But it's actually not at all. And the gain is that a home instead of a house. If we can deliver a home instead of a house, it like
we've reached our goal.
The money doesn't come into it. Nothing else comes into it. Where would you prefer to live, in a home or a house?
Yeah.
It's an enormous difference. So that for me has been, which is sort of counter to all my early, professional training about delivering things. Here's a thing.
Yeah. Has there been anything from your point of view, Christine?
I think the thing that surprised me the most has been me, because I found myself in a situation, and I mean, we three have known each other for a good long time, and we've done work together as colleagues and as friends and as a combination. And I just feel the need to say right now that one of the things that surprised me is how perfectly I've been accepted by this threesome, and we're often a foursome in our regular meetings. And what an uplifting feeling it is to feel I can say anything I want. I can say anything I feel, and it is processed, not reacted against. It's processed and it's accepted. And I tell you, it's so liberating to be with anyone in the world that you feel that way about. And I've found it with my background and my proclivities and my temperament and my character. Man, I found that a big surprise, even with all the work I've done. So thank you both.
Thank you for your involvement, because I'm certain it's reciprocated. I've learned plenty for your insight, Christine, along the way.
Oh, and to be honest with you, I've seen that your leadership in that role of being able to make yourself more vulnerable to work through those bits. And and the good thing is we haven't made this an easy process between us either. So some of the stuff we're going to have some disagreements, or hey, I'm saying this and you're saying that, but our ability to listen to each other's opinion and take it on board and process it as individuals and come back and have that discussion. I think you showing that or modeling that from my point of view has made it easier for me to process my own stuff so that it's easier for us to share it as a group. And that experience gives me a lot more hope that other people might be able to get to that point in their journeys when they form their groups and they form their households and they do those things, that we can give them some of those tools to hopefully get to the point where they can feel that level of, oh, this is the place I should be. Because not only can I have my needs taken care of to keep the sun off my head, but I can engage with people who I genuinely am getting, my needs taken care of as a person, but also my ability to challenge myself and work in that group. That has been awesome. So I agree with you.
And I think we're really, at least consciously, trying to be open to the idea that every single person we interact with will teach us something and will be a leader in some way. And we're not talking about being the the leaders, we're talking about learning and being led, as well as trying to lead and trying to impart what we have learned or what we think we've learned. So yeah, it's really important to us to have wise people and open people who will join in the conversation that we can learn from, and not just learn about buildings and not just learn about society, but learn about ourselves.
Yeah,
that's an extremely important point. And I think every time that we have, and I agree with you there, that I probably in today's world, I might have misused that word leader, in the fact that, you know, from a business point of view, quite often, you know, I have been forced into that role. You know, this is, but in this situation, I'm actually getting a lot from the fact that we don't really have, it's an extremely flat system that, you know, and yes, people will need to be experts in certain thing, and we defer to the person who knows more about that, and they should rightly lead us through that componentry. But I've been led through as much, you know, the group facilitation process. You know, Rowan is by far the leader in that, because he understands that componentry so well and knows how to articulate it better than I do. And you and I have the same stuff. We get caught talking too much, but Rowan's very good. Rowan's very good at you know, leading us through that journey. So I think your point is very valid, that as we build more trust, we can feel comfortable with one person being the person who might have more experience to pass on to the others and leading us through that rabbit hole. So yeah, I agree with you 100% on that for sure.
I think it's possibly interesting or useful to drop in that we also don't need to nail it on our first incarnation of this, you know, forming groups and starting to do a different process. We need to be, you know, part of this doing our own individual work is allowing us to learn and to grow and to make mistakes along the way. So it won't be perfection, but we just need sufficient openness and engagement to the idea that you can progress to the next level of understanding the idea. So it'll be a constant process that you won't, you know, we're not going to hand you a manual that you can read in, you know, 3 hours and then have got it sorted. It's not going to work like that. It'll be an ongoing process, but hugely rewarding, enormously rewarding.
Absolutely.
So flowing from this rabbit hole and some weird paradigms that we've all had to adjust ourselves around to get our heads around, we are driving for action too. So we each have seen plenty of conversations or lots of report writing. Who doesn't like a good report? And documentation that has been formulated over the years and sat on a shelf and essentially not gone anywhere. There's and we won't point to a particular profession or industry per se, but we can all think of examples. But we're actually also highly interested in delivering and doing something. Now, Christine, did you want to introduce your Gin Road project?
Only very briefly. Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that. I do have I have 2 properties on the Tablelands that I think are suitable for this, and we picked one as the pilot project property. It sits in a lovely, environmentally beautiful space and just out of the town of Malanda, and has beautiful dirt and beautiful rainforest around it, a little creek, Rainforest Creek, all of those aspects. And close enough to town to bicycle to town to do your shopping. So it's a good place for a pilot project, and it is that kind of setting where the best of people can be brought out. And I think that I don't really want to say much more than that. We have started with some landscaping, and Darren is busy doing some designs for us. And now we've got to start to populate the potential building that will be built by populating the people who are going to, finding the people who are going to live in it, and populating the group, the household, the home, the society.
The home, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that some of the fundamentals are there. we've got financing, we've got a place, we've got landscaping happening. It's starting. And by this time next year, we hope we might have something to show people what one concept will look like. One concept, one piece of ground, one design, one group of people, and then see how we can expand that to many other properties, settings, groups of people.
Yeah, and that'll be exciting to be able to actually show people. Yeah.
Oh,
and
yeah.
that, because that idea that, we're talking about it conceptually as something, but the idea of saying, here's a house that has been designed to be a home that's designed for people to live as individuals, but have some components which are designed to draw them together to make them the best group of people they can be, is different in design, because a lot of design is about, one person in the home having a master bedroom, and everyone else, being there in subordinate. So if we can have a home that's designed to bring everyone's greater self to the forefront, and embrace the environment around them, I think I'm excited that, we're continuing the journey to this home, because of the fact that it will be an example. As you said, it's going to be a solution, not the solution, but it genuinely takes a massive step from where the housing we have currently to be able to start to say, here's an alternative. And Kristen probably put it never any better than say, we know that, if we've got a problem with our fuel, we can go and get an electric car, because that paradigm is out there. Whereas at the moment, if you are disconcerted with your current housing system, there's no electric car out there of the housing system for you to go and check out. So I think this, and it might be the first version of an electric car, but I think this property might give an opportunity for people to say what could be an alternative way of doing things. And so that's really exciting, that we're not just going to have lots of more podcasts about this, that we're trying our darndest to get to the point where people can actually come and experience those.
Precisely.
I think it's useful to point out that Christine might actually be wearing 4 or 5 hats in this project, but for the sake of labels and articulating, it might be helpful to describe your role primarily as maybe the investor, Christine. So
yeah, I think
in a sense,
I think it's an important role, because nothing happens if you can't pay for it. And
that's right.
No.
I see this as a possibility of creating an investment that I could either sell or that I can have an income from, but where there's this sense of equality in housing. So everybody needs privacy, everybody needs connection, everybody needs warmth, everybody, there are things that we all need. And how do we establish that in one homehold instead of household, in one little community? And it's going to be really challenging for me as an investor to also be an equal once we get to the point of building a house where I want to be part of it.
Exactly. And ultimately, we may end up building a different house that is where you reside. So the other occupants of the house can be a tenant resident, on a secure tenure long-term lease structure. They could be an owner of the space. You could have people owning a share as multiple investors in a property. So there's a lot of flexibility how you could participate in the process,
financially as well as a human being. Yeah, and I think this is one of the brilliant things about the way you two have conceptualized this, is that it allows for a lot of different ownership structures, a lot of different design structures, a lot of different financial solutions, and as broad an array of human solutions as each group needs. A spiritual group that are brought together by spirituality is going to be a different group to a bird watchers group, or a aging in place group, or whatever. And so, or say a single mothers co-op. Who knows? Who knows? But how do we develop and I think you've done a brilliant job of this, you two, a concept that could take into consideration all of those people, and create a more social but a still private life for each of us.
Mm.
And that might even be a good segue into, you know, one of the probably most challenging things that we've been dealing with is we know there's so many people who could be essentially are seeking a solution to housing because they don't have it. And we've sort of got this little bit of a difficult area where we've also realized, hey, maybe there's some people that we can't help everyone. What are some of the people that we might not be able to help? And these are difficult conversations because you'd like to help everyone. But the truth is that there may be some groups that can say, look, you know, this model isn't developed to help everyone. It's designed to help some people, but not everyone. And that's probably something we've all internally wrestled with. You know, maybe this isn't for everyone, and who might not be suitable for.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyone wanting to leap into that one?
Oh, no one wants to leave.
That's really a hard one. But of course, we're also talking about affordability. Well,
yes,
we you know, if we're looking for an affordable solution, we actually can't have somebody on the bones of their ass, to be quite blunt. That's a person who can be looked after by the government, by Centrelink, by housing subsidies, by public housing.
Yeah.
But we don't have to. The most important thing is not how financially liquid are you. What can you contribute? What can you contribute as a human? If you have no money to contribute, do you have time? Do you have skills? Do you have something? And those are the questions that become quite difficult. It's very difficult to make a list. Well, okay, if you don't want people on the bones of your ass, then but because we don't have a way of accommodating them. Not that we wouldn't like to help, but then where do you go from there? What's your list? What's your list of characteristics? Well, it's almost all internal. It might be that you'd have an aging in place group. Well, then you probably want a bunch of oldies like me, because there's no point rowing for you aging in place. You're not there yet. And if it's bird watchers, well, that's not me, because I don't do a lot of bird watching. But how do you? There's a deeper layer above that sits underneath those external characteristics, those demographic characteristics or interest characteristics. And what are those? And there has to be some urge to connection, some conscious realization that I have to work on relationships. I can't just depend on them. I have to work at them. I have to work at myself. And I don't know how we're ever going to sort that out. I think that people are, in the end, I'm going to bet that they will self-select. And once they figure out that this is a little bit painful and a little bit hard work, the ones who don't want to go through any pain or any hard work to have a better solution are just going to drop out. And I hope that'll be the case.
I think you're right. And I think the other, I think the other part of that is we've also said that to some extent, part of this is that you're going to have to form some level of agreement at some point in time. So if you're not in a position where you can form an agreement, you're almost self-selecting yourself out. And that we've also said that if you're not willing to do some level of personal work because you're going to be dealing with other people, you're almost self-selecting yourself out as well. So ultimately, if you engage with the concept and then you engage with the elements and you're willing to be active in it, you know, we started to use this term, you know, these are going to be hard to get into, but easy to get out of. I think those might be, hey, look, if you're willing to do the work, well, then the other bits can be evaluated. I mean, I do think you're right in saying that we want these to be viable for everyone involved. So if you can never contribute anything to them, well, then you're probably not going to be capable of being involved in it. No. And I know I cut you off there, Rowan. Did you have something else to add in there as well?
I think you've nailed it, that we don't have to have perfection. So my contribution could look like this many hours or this much, you know, rent per week, or however you want to frame it. And I don't think that it has to be a perfect answer. I think that's the beauty, is you have to be willing to come forward with a personal thing I'm willing to put this in and do this work. As a group, we have the tools to grow. We have the experience. We have the experts to pull in to address deficits, weaknesses, areas that we need to further define. And that, for me, is, the sexy, attractive part of this whole process is getting a group to actually develop.
Scary part.
Yeah, scary at the same time, but
Yeah.
absolutely enormously rewarding to see people individually. The sum is greater than the individual parts. We've all come to this with our own broken background baggage and whatever, but we're willing to have a go. And then if we're all willing to have a go and we get coached with this and we get some expert help with that, and we get these set of tools and we develop ourselves from being, a bit sort of dysfunctional and got all of our baggage, we're still going to have a degree of all of that still. None of this is going to magically disappear, all our past sins or our inherent character weaknesses, but we will have the ability to just be pointing in the same direction. And if People Purpose Place has one thing about it, has the ability to align people with a common direction to deliver a home that works for this common purpose.
Beautifully put.
Absolutely. And that might even be a really good place to consider where we might finish for tonight, because I think, we've really been able to cover a lot of ground. I don't know what you guys think, but it might even be an opportunity for us now to consider, modeling what a checkout question might look like, if that works for both of you as well.
Perfect. Love to. And
Happy to.
Nobody could say it better than Rowan just said it. So let's close for tonight with our checkout. What's our checkout question?
Absolutely. I reckon the checkout question, considering it's our first podcast together as a group, do we feel like we're able to communicate what we wanted to be able to let the people know about what an introduction to People Purpose Place might be? Ron, what do you think?
What an introduction might be. Hopefully this is so let's do a checkout on the introduction to People Purpose Place, what it might be. And generally I get to go last, so I'll stick with that and ask.
Cool.
Christine or
Darren, from my point of view, I think tonight we're able to make a really good start. I think we're able to let other people know what People Purpose Place is, and hopefully to also, I think the most important thing we've been able to show tonight is to model that this is about groups working together to find a solution, and that we're one of them to learn and model those experiences so that we can give you more of those skills. So I'm appreciative for the opportunity to continue to work with you guys and explore what we need to do to help other groups be better groups.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you.
Christine?
I think I want a short checkout because I'm usually too voluble. I just want to say, let's do more of this and let's explore further, because I think we've had a good start. And that's my checkout. Thank you.
Awesome. I agree with you 100%. Rowan?
Thank you, Darren and Christine, and appreciation as always for spending time discussing this meaningful topic. For me, it's on my life's purpose and serving where I need to be. So I find that rewarding on a daily basis. It gets me out of bed and I feel invigorated to do that. The beauty is I'm doing it with some great humans who have come along on the journey, who seem to be willing to accept my silliness or whatever, or my foibles. And together we seem to be making progress towards goals of people having some awesome homes, which is ultimately the best outcome I could possibly hope for. So thank you.
Again, Rowan's nailed it. So that's a perfect spot to finish for tonight.
Thanks, Al.
Thanks, Rowan.
Thank you.
Good night, all.